This is Underground Connections, an inside look at the underground music scene. Our guest for this episode is Nick. Nick created Sidenote, possibly LA's first underground electronic music podcast, and he also DJs as Decoy Nick. We discuss some of the best parties in the world, how to carve your own path as a creative, and the often overlooked aspects of psychedelic medicine. Here we go.
Thank you so much for being on today. In a lot of ways, you inspired us to do this show, and you're also one of the few people I feel like I can indulge in a music conversation with at full throttle because of
that.
You're really a seasoned raver with pretty comprehensive knowledge of the different genres of electronic music and DJs. So we're so gratefully have you here today.
Thank you, man. Thank you guys.
Thanks for being here.
I got to say, I am so excited to be sitting here on the opposite side of you. So you were on my pod a year ago, I think. And we were just talking about it in advance of your big Euro trip last year.
Right.
And you're saying that is now happening again, but we're on different sides of the spectrum. And I got to say, I could not be more excited to be on the opposite side. Coming here, no nervousness, just this is going to be fun. Whereas, when I was in the driver's seat, every time I would have a guest on, it'd be fuck, I got to do all this work. I got to put this shit together. I got to make sure it's it comes out well.
Yeah.
And so thankfully, you get to bear that burden. You guys get to bear that burden today. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, of course. But you saying that it's a little bit of a surprise because I feel like you're a really excellent interviewer. And
Thank you.
Anyone I've spoken to has watched your show has always agreed with me and said the same thing, that you're just really good at it. And when I came, I just felt very comfortable to be able to just kind of let go and let you handle the reins. And any shortcomings as my first interview, I feel like you kind of filled in the gaps and helped along the way. So it was really fun.
Thank you.
Yes, that's what a good host should do. Be a natural conversationist. So,
well, hopefully I'm as good a guest as I am an interviewer. I feel like in my personal life, it's a little harder for me to talk about myself than it is to ask people a bunch of questions. So we'll see. Hopefully I don't fail you.
Yeah, no, definitely. So just a good segue into your podcast, you had so many people on your show, especially at the budding parts of their career, who have really made a name for themselves since. And I guess we'll do some shout outs and ode to your podcast. So I know you had Claus on, a neo-rave techno DJ and producer. You had Nectar on, another staple name. You had one of the best guys, Omar of Techno Fam LA, on, and that's really how I learned about him and his parties. Errol Bangs, pioneer of what I'd call West Coast house music. Also a lot of big shots too. You had Ray Cash, who throws the temple parties, Sarah Strandberg of Fallen Angel, G of 6am, and Marco of Synthetic Minds. And watching your podcast really helped me meet and connect with a lot of people, because I was in a place where it was very hard for me to approach people and do a cold hello. And I'd always use their episode on your podcast as kind of an icebreaker and say hey, I watched this episode. I learned X, Y, and Z about you. And so it really helped kind of facilitate relationships that have been very important to me now.
Dude, that's awesome, man. I'm glad you got sort of some use out of it, because I feel obviously I met a lot of amazing people through the podcast. And for those who don't know, it's on hiatus now while I focus on other shit. But I was doing it kind of in a vacuum where I just felt okay, I'm not really getting that many views. Is anyone even really listening to this shit?
Yeah.
I would look at the stats sometimes, especially on the audio version.
Okay.
And occasionally I could see there's one guy in Germany who's listening to this shit every week. But it was also kind of a lot to kind of bear, on my shoulders solo. I was basically producing the whole thing on my own. I had a little help. Shout out to Angel Kim Spicer Productions. But bigger things were calling her away. And, I got to the point where I was kind of handling it all on my own. And it was just like, fuck, like, why am I even doing this? So it's so good to hear that, it was able to help facilitate connections for you.
Yeah, no, of course. And like, I feel like a lot of these things that we do in life, we never know what kind of effect it has on other people until like someone kind of steps up and says like, hey, like this did this or changed my life in these ways. And it kind of like reveals a little bit of like how interconnected we are. And even though we're not always aware of it.
What was it that kept you going? Because I know you have a lot of episodes out.
I think just to ride the journey, I had initially, and I didn't meet this goal, but I initially told myself that I just want to get to 100. Okay. Because in advance of launching, I remember sitting down with my brother, and he was just like, yeah, I don't know of any podcast that's made it to 100 episodes that's bad. Okay, so if you can just get to that threshold, that's kind of like the Malcolm Gladwell. It's not quite 10,000 hours, but it's 100 episodes. And, that was always viewed as like, that will be the inflection point. And maybe I'll get there, never say never. But that was kind of the initial push. And then I think when I first launched the pod, it was a different sort of era in terms of COVID, right? So the work from home culture was definitely still much more intact when I first started. And I think that was definitely a big impetus for why I wanted to do it. Cause it's like, oh shit, I don't have to commute to an office anymore. I have a lot more flexibility and freedom. So yeah, why aren't I doing other shit with this additional capacity that I have? But over time, as kind of the pandemic has waned, and at least as far as the company I work at, the desire to go back to like 2019 as though nothing has happened, as that has kind of grown, it's become a lot more difficult for me to kind of claim that time for myself. And look, maybe these are fucking excuses, right? I'm sure Gia Wang would hear me talking and be like, bro, you're giving a bunch of excuses. Just fucking do it. Yeah. So maybe it's just the line, right? But it definitely, as time went by, it definitely felt like harder and harder to keep it going.
That's definitely a mantra that I try to practice, like with anything that I do, is like quality through quantity. It just like puts you in that headspace, and you kind of can always look back and see like what has or hasn't worked with certain projects, and like you move forward from there.
What was your favorite part about having your podcast?
That's a good question. Oh man, I love being on the other side of this shit. I think just meeting a bunch of cool people, like obviously I wouldn't be sitting here today if not for that. So I think it definitely facilitated, I guess, for myself, and it's great to hear for you as well, definitely facilitated some good connections. I think as someone who considers himself an introvert, I think just having the opportunity to connect with and meet new people and sort of practice that sort of, the communication skills and kind of rapport building and all that stuff was amazing. So it definitely which has translated to my career as well. And I think just like getting to learn about new artists and new music. You mentioned some names in there who, I'm still friends with, continue to follow. And like Errol Bangs, for instance, like he's invented a genre, like that shit didn't exist before. And now, it's like that West Coast, like gangsta feel married with house music, which is insanity. Funny story about that. I was listening to Spotify playlist and one of his tracks came on in my car and
amazing.
My buddy was in the car with me and he's like, fuck yeah. Like he was like losing his shit over the track. And he's like, who is this? I'm like, oh, it's Errol Bangs, like some guy who was on my show. And like my friend was like super impressed. So not that that's what it's for, right? But just the fact that, I get to have connectivity to people who are like creating cool shit out there was and is cool.
Yeah, no, nice added bonus. I mean, also, was there, I don't know, some kind of pattern between having people approach you, or you approaching people? Like how would you usually get in touch?
I would say that like 90% of the time, which was part of what made it so difficult, was having to chase people down to get them on the pod. Occasionally I got to the point where, I mean, not even that big, but big enough where I could maybe like put out a story every now and then to be like, hey, who wants to be on?
Right.
Because basically I feel like my following was mostly DJs, locally anyway, who were kind of interested in the other people that I was interviewing. So occasionally I would, nab a few folks just by putting a feeler out there. But for the most part, it was definitely, me pursuing. But as I had a body of work to point people to, it became much easier to kind of get people through the door. I think like the initial like 5 or 6 episodes really fucking hard because it didn't exist yet. I didn't know, what it was going to look like. Even when I had a couple episodes under my belt, I don't feel like I had kind of reached the stride yet where I felt like this seemed like a compelling, like people would feel compelled like to come on. So yeah, that was tough. Shout out to Reagan from Dance Spirit, Robotech, for being my first guest. Because I think without him, the rest of it wouldn't have happened. And just like some random guy who was a friend of a friend who was like, "Yeah, like I want to come on and do this podcast," and and for a first episode and for a pod with somebody that he didn't know, like he was actually like exceptionally intimate in terms of like sharing personal details and stuff. So I appreciate that. And so yeah, but like I said, over time it did get easier.
Yeah, no, I met I met Marco of Synthetic Minds kind of using this as an icebreaker. I remember going to an underground and he was behind the bar and he was like looking down at his phone for like a little bit, and I kind of would bounce around at the party and go back, and he was still doing it, and I was like, you know what, like I just got to go and shoot my shot. And then I approached him and kind of said, hey, I saw you on this podcast and like I learned a lot of things about you, and I also share this interest in stoicism, stuff like that. And then actually, surprisingly enough, what I saw was that he wasn't really doing business on his phone. He was watching like a soccer game. And another one was the last time I saw you was when we went to Sasha and Digweed, and we happened to cross paths there.
We did, yeah.
And that was my like first proper meeting of Gia from 6 a.m.
Okay.
Was in the crowd there too. And
I didn't know he was there that night or that day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I saw a lot of people.
All the old heads showed up for Sasha and Digweed. Just as a side note, that was like the median age of that party was like the highest I've ever seen at a party that I've been to of late.
Definitely what we'd call a geriatric.
Yeah,
crowd,
yeah,
right?
it was definitely like the hours were certainly geriatric as well. Like they're like, get started at 4 p.m. and then we'll get you home by like 10:30 or something like obscene. It was still a good time. Shout out to the masters, Sasha and Digweed.
How are you now, Alex? With the meeting people part.
Oh, the meeting people part. Okay, like I'll say this: I still every now and then still have a little bit of like, I don't know, nervousness when it comes to depending on who I'm meeting. But things have gone a lot easier because now, like, because of like this kind of, I don't know, following I've built, people will approach me like 90%.
Yeah, you're a known guy now, dude.
Yeah. So which takes the stress off of me.
Yeah, like just... I see you online. So first of all, congratulations on
Thank you.
Like everything you've accomplished in the last year since we've spoken. So I feel like, you were kind of getting off the ground. I feel like you were networking really hard everywhere. And I can see that it's paid dividends, so you're on lineups, you're hosting the show, you never won. So really congratulations on that. But beyond that, here's a funny story. Like, so you put out your shit on TikTok and so I have a younger brother, like quite younger than me, but also parties. And he told me that he was just like following your shit like on TikTok, that you would show up in his feed and he's like, yeah, this guy really knows. And then he told me that like it was like weeks later that he realized that you were on my podcast.
Okay, nice.
So like you're generating followers that sort of, that have like, I guess, independently of anything that you're sorry, let me rephrase that. Your content is generating followers just writ large, outside of any just networking that you're doing here.
Yeah. It's definitely been a good like plan of attack, I guess, among like other things like showing up to shows and like making music and all that. And it's just like in its own ways like helped me make a lot of connections and meet people. And I think that like added practice of like having so many conversations, you just get better at it naturally. And like my tip's always been like the icebreaker is like all you need to go up to someone just to have something like either something you know about them or like about them, or hey, even like you get up close and you say like, oh, I like this necklace that you're wearing or whatever it is. And if they're any like if as long as they're like a human being, they will reciprocate and like meet you halfway and keep the conversation going. And it's like there's like a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves that we don't need to.
100%. Yeah. Like as an introvert, like you think, or speaking for myself, right? Like I always think that in order to engage with someone, it has to be sort of like clever or like really like literally you can go up to anyone and just say anything and it'll generally kind of build from there.
Yeah, just kind of like think back to grade school. Like you'd go up to someone and like, hey, we're friends now.
Yeah.
You know, and it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that just because like we're adults.
It's just vibe, man.
Yeah.
It's just
the
vibe. Yeah.
Very true. How did you come up with the idea for your podcast?
Yeah. So I guess it all goes back to COVID, right? And this was a theme that came up a lot in my pod as well when I had asked DJs and stuff about kind of like how, like what was their inception. And a lot of people were like, oh, it was COVID, you know, like lockdown. So I had a similar experience. And then as things were evolving out of lockdown, I remember sort of asking myself like, okay, there's a scene that I really fucking love that I've been a participant in for a really long time. But it was always like dabbling, right? Like I would maybe go to a party like once every couple months and then, but for years, right? Decades. And, you know, it got to the point where it's like, man, I'm tired of just kind of being a consumer and a spectator. You know, I would love to take a real crack at, you know, being a part of sort of creating this scene. And, you know, when I sat down to think about like, what are some ways I can do that? It's like, okay, well, DJ's been a hobby of mine for a really, really long time, but, you know, I don't have the capacity or the bandwidth to be going out every fucking weekend and making friends with all the promoters. And like, that was just like, I knew that that's a no-go. Promoting, like maybe, you know, I'm really impressed by like Jimmy Maharis with Into the Woods, because he is a one-man show who throws that party, you know, week after week. And, you know, from what I understand, you know, he just has his preferred people, like for vendors and everything, calls them up, like brings them all in, and like he keeps that shit going. So I was like, maybe I can do that. But, you know, there's these sort of upfront investment is quite high because you got to pay to bring in the talent. And you got to like, you know, room and board them and entertain them. So maybe still like a bit too high investment for me. And so, you know, I thought about what am I enjoying now, especially like in lockdown, right? I was listening to a lot of podcasts, listening to a lot of like comedy podcasts, like all brands of podcasts, mostly just people shooting the shit about nothing. And I was like, oh yeah, like that doesn't exist for electronic music yet.
Right.
There's a lot more sort of formal interview that's very sort of PR driven. But there's no like, let's just sit down with the DJs. I would love to hear about, you know, like the drug fueled stories and the touring and all the crazy shit that happens. That was really what I wanted to kind of unlock. And yeah, that was kind of the inception of it. And then, you know, couple that with, you know, all the time that I had on my hands from lockdown, and that's kind of how it came to be.
That's cool. Where did you shoot it?
In my home, which was also a little weird. I mean, no hate on it, like any of my guests, but it was like a little weird, like, oh, just inviting strangers to my home on a like pretty regular basis. You know, in retrospect, I mean, it was fine, but it's still like, you know, you're sort of breaching that kind of level of, you know, like privacy that you would have, you know, in a normal kind of professional setting. But yeah, I did it at home, you know, tried to shoot like once a week, was pretty good about it initially. And then, like I said, I had shout out to Angel Kim Spicer's productions, had her help in putting things together, especially early on. But it was still, I'm looking around at your infrastructure here, and this is infrastructure that I could only have dreamed of. I guess.
I appreciate that.
I know in one of our recent conversations, you mentioned like what led to the hiatus of your show was like a couple plants. And how did they play part in like
this? I mean, so I think part of it was just a capacity thing in terms of like the booking, and I will say I had a final, like, so one of the last episodes, or maybe even the last episode that I shot that never made it to air, in trying to like produce everything myself, I had like a huge audio error where basically, and it happened a few times over the life, where like we did the whole podcast and the audio was gone, like unusable, right? And then I remember sitting on it for a few weeks, and then having to tell these guys, it was Foresight and Hubris. I forget the name of the party they produced, Fortitude crew. And I remember like weeks later having to go to them like, hey, sorry, like something happened with the audio, and that episode's never coming to light. Welcome to have you back. And I get it. Like, so, we never made it happen again. And I kind of took that as a sign to like, maybe chill out for a little bit. But I think what you're alluding to is that I did a plant medicine retreat for ayahuasca at the end of April. And it was my 4th retreat. And so by the end of it, I had drank like 11 times total. So I think it was the 9th time the first night I sat. It was a 3-night retreat. And by the end of it, I've now sat with the medicine 11 times. And yeah, one of the nights, I remember coming into it just kind of like, because I have a boring kind of professional job that, that pays a mortgage, and, but I'm not the hugest fan of it, not the most passionate about it. And I remember coming into it kind of like, okay, my intention is to kind of find out or get some insight on what my true purpose is, or why, why am I here?
Right.
And, I was really hoping that the insight that I would get would be like, yeah, don't worry, bro, your Bitcoin's gonna pop, and then you can just fuck off to an island somewhere and do whatever you want. I apologize for all the cursing, by the way. Are we good? Are we good?
Don't worry.
Express yourself how
okay.
Explicit content.
Yeah, I was like, I'm really hoping it's going to tell me I can, just fuck off to an island and enjoy the rest of my days, meditating and tripping on acid or whatever. And what it gave me was like, oh no, like, you're actually supposed to be in the career you're in, and, with the hope that one day you're actually going to be in a position to, to influence that industry in a way that's going to help the world.
Nice.
And it was like a very strong download, very like clear download, like, this is the path you're on. So do it with full intention and full sort of effort. And I mean, there are a lot of downloads around it. Like, you're not going to like it. It's going to be tough and all this shit, but also that, you have a strong support network, and there's going to be more people that kind of come in and out of your life, that help facilitate this sort of, end goal. And, this ultimately this change that you're going to hope that hopefully, I'll be able to affect, sometime in the future. So yeah, I walked away from it, if you ever done it, have you done it?
No.
Okay. If you ever done it, like some of the downloads can be very powerful, and in the moment they feel so real, right? It's like Moses standing on the mountaintop, sort of, like getting the 10 commandments. But, like after you leave the retreat and you're back to like mundane life, sitting in traffic, maybe it feels less real. So if you ask me, like, if any of that is going to happen, I don't know. But I will say that I walked away from it with a much greater sense of engagement with my day job, that I never had before. And so, yeah, I mean, it kind of feels like that's the path. And, you know, maybe one day, if it does happen, I can come back and kind of, you know, give a bigger download. But yeah, so I think that's part of the reason why I haven't really focused on the podcast as much. To really, you know, hopefully, I don't know if it's true. I don't know if any of it's real.
Yeah.
But hopefully fulfill the true calling.
Wait, can you clarify if the path you're on, is it for your day job, or do you mean like DJing and podcasting
No,
and all
like,
that?
for the day job. So
Day job, okay.
So it was kind of like, you know, we or I or the spirit was like, yeah, we know you hate this job. We know you hate your job.
Yeah.
But there's a reason you're there.
Okay.
And it's because, you know, the industry that you work in is, you know, responsible for like a lot of kind of society's woes. And, you know, stick around so that, you know, one day maybe you'll be in a position to like affect greater change from the inside.
Yeah, so walk with purpose. I like that. I can resonate with your whole story, honestly. Beginning from like you wanting to like work in the music scene versus being a attendee. For me, it was almost immediate. Like I started in the scene a year and a half ago, and
wait, that you've only been raving for a year and a half?
Yeah, and
okay.
A year and a half ago is like the same day I started raving is the same day I started managing DJs.
Okay,
because I felt like a connection that I've never felt before. And then 6 months later, I had my own experience the same way you did, but not ayahuasca. And that calling for me was through music. So I was teaching myself.
Tell me more about this experience.
Okay, well, I was having a horrible time. I should start like 3 months after my first rave. My first rave was on my 25th birthday. And it was called Social Desert. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Love them. But 3 months later, I wanted to do more. So I got a job with Insomniac, so I could start just trying more things. So I work with Insomniac at all their events. And so I worked EDC, and then I had tickets to go to LIB, which was literally 2 days after EDC. So went home.
So this was last year's LIB?
Last year. Okay. And yeah, so worked, went home from Vegas to Palmdale. I live in Palmdale. To Bakersfield. And I was alone. I was supposed to have people come with me, but they were sick. They were just canceled, whatever. And also there was horrible service, so I couldn't meet up with anyone. And it was a 5-day event. And I was having a really tough time. Like I was just struggling because I didn't want to feel like lonely, I guess. It was more than that. It was just like I was trying to make friends and I couldn't, and it just wasn't working out. So the last day I decided to just stay in my Airbnb and not go to the festival because I just figured it couldn't do anything to me. You know, like I won't get anything out of it. Instead, I stayed home. I don't know if I should say this, but I stayed home. I took a thing that I did for the first time. And I was by myself and I taught myself how to DJ. So my cousin, my cousin left her DDJ for me to like practice with or whatever. Just, it was there. So I downloaded Rekordbox and then taught myself literally how to DJ. And while I was doing that, I'm like having all these visions of my future of like all the people I'm supposed to meet and all the events that I'm supposed to like go through and experience. And it was just overwhelming and powerful and like, it was nice. It was like the birth of my like inner child.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And ever since then, she's been like by my side. So I just always make sure to keep her happy with everything that I do.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Or like inner child, or, you know, I like to think of it as like connection with your higher self.
Yeah. Yeah, it aligned that night.
Yeah.
Everything was aligned. Everything was clear. And
You just had a knowing. You just knew.
yeah, it's
That's
annoying.
awesome. Thank you
thanks
for sharing.
that.
Yeah, I haven't shared that before with you.
No.
Okay, well, here we are.
I mean, I want to know what it was, but I mean, we can chat offline.
Yeah.
On the note of you mentioning that, these downloads came to you in a very like in your face kind of way, and then that connection kind of like wanes once it wears off. It reminds me of this Zen saying, which is, before enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood and carry water. And these medicines can give us what we need to see, but then we also have to always go back to the real world
100%.
and figure out
100%.
how we can incorporate that message there. We don't get to like escape this existence until it's our time.
Yeah,
That's so true.
The phrase they use for it is integration. So that's a big buzzword in psychedelics, where it's like, it's one thing to have the enlightenment or to have the experiences, but what's important is how you bring that with you into the real world. To your point.
Yeah, it's like talk therapy. Like the therapist doesn't fix you. They tell you what you need to do to fix yourself. Yeah. And it's the same thing with plant medicine.
The other way I like to think of it is, and I didn't come up with this, but there's this idea that, plant medicine or psychedelics, it's like cleaning all the icons off of your desktop.
Okay.
Right? So you have a fresh desktop, you're like ready. Yeah. But of course, like over time, all the little icons, all the bullshit shortcuts and documents start piling up again. And so it's not only is it sort of, not only does that often require going back to the psychedelic, but then it's incumbent upon you to make sure you keep your desktop clean.
Can we emphasize that we are talking about this not in the party sense, but in a more holistic and
of course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sacred sense?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I believe in that 100%. Like, I don't play around with.
No, I feel you.
Yeah. I just want to emphasize.
Right? Yeah. As far as like when you ingested, how connected are you still to the real world?
Actually, very surprisingly so. Actually, because friends always ask, like, oh, like, isn't there a lot of puking? Isn't there a lot of shitting? Like, what happens? And it's very much kind of this thing where, because the way they set it up is, you're in this large room and you set up sort of a nest. So everyone's lined up, like sets up like a sleeping bag, just like next to each other against the wall. So head against the wall, then like feet toward the center of the room, and you're just all around the perimeter, right? So that's kind of your space for the whole ceremony, the whole retreat. So you drink your medicine, and you go back to your little sleeping area, your sleeping pad, and you just kind of lie back and do your work. But anytime those kind of physical needs come about, you need to go to the bathroom, you need to puke. Yeah. It's very easy to just kind of turn off whatever's going on internally and just be like, okay, I got to get up, And of course, there are times when that's not true, but I would say that for the most part, you are still very much connected to external reality in terms of, tending to your physical safety and needs. It's just that, you can then, when you're lying down, kind of sink into that space and have a deep internal experience.
And I'm guessing there's a lot of closed eye visuals when you're.
Yeah, I mean that's
or open eye.
That's kind of, for me, it's mainly kind of a closed eye situation. Like if I'm just looking around the room, it's not like it's not even like acid or mushrooms where things are wavy and stuff. It's almost just kind of very static and just kind of normal. But then when you kind of close your eyes and kind of float into the medicine, just wild visuals. It can range anything from like the most vivid kind of like 4K movies, like of real world stuff being played to you, to like kind of like the most mind boggling, like sacred geometry and like kind of insane, like DMT visuals.
And you did this 11 times?
I've done it in my life, or I would say in my healing journey. I've sat with the medicine 11 times. Sorry for being that guy.
No.
And that's over the course of 4 retreats. First one I did was, by the way, thank you for allowing this rave podcast to have pivoted into the new age.
Of course.
Which I love. I did my first one in 2017. Very different person back then, very different time in my life. Basically wasn't doing well and was sort of had exhausted every option to find some peace and serenity. And ayahuasca was kind of like the last stop on that train. And I wouldn't say that it was an instant change, but it was sort of the inflection point from which like a new trajectory was built. Or if you want to be super woo about it, it was like that was the point that I had shifted into a new timeline that was much sort of happier and sort of connected to the universe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me backtrack because I'm jumping. We should be transparent about this stuff because it is real and it is an option, you know, for people who do need healing, help, whatever that they're going through. Will Smith talks about ayahuasca in his book. So
he does, yeah. It's becoming very trendy, right? Like Aaron Rodgers, Mike Tyson. He's a big fan of the bufo, the toad medicine. Have you heard of that one?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think we need it, right? Like as we can see, just driving around the city, right? Like LA's not what it used to be. It's definitely kind of on the decline. I feel like, and I feel like the world, right? I feel like, you know, so much of the negativity that's out there in the world today, I feel like is a result of just kind of like ego and unhealed trauma and just sort of hurting people. And yeah, I feel like we need these modalities as a means to kind of like build the new earth. Yeah. Fuck, I'm sorry. I sound like such
I like
new age hippie right now. Like I really apologize.
I had a podcast before this. Well, I still have it. I could work on it if I want to. It's called More Than Matter, but this is exactly what we talk about.
Oh, you have like a spiritual, like metaphysical podcast?
Yes.
See you soon. See you soon.
Okay, it's hosted in the same room.
Okay. All right. Well, back here in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, let me balance the scales then, and let me emphasize that before you ever take any kind of medicine, you as an individual should always research, because
100%.
Any medicine, whether it's what is it, American medicine or what is it called when you get the needles put into you? Acupuncture or anything homeopathic or even psychedelic, everything comes with its risks along with the benefits. It's
do your diligence, folks.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And know what's best for you.
I also want to add that you should be mentally ready. Like, you should want to do it. You shouldn't not want to do it and still do it.
Yeah. So I feel like what I hear a lot is that when you hear the calling, sort of,
there you go.
You'll know, right? Like even for me, I had been aware as a raver. I had been aware of kind of like DMT and ayahuasca for many, many, many years, right? But the idea of like, oh wait, you sit in a room and you puke and you shit yourself and you have like hallucinations. Why would I want to do that? Yeah. It wasn't until I was personally, at a point where I was in a lot of pain, like looking for answers, where that was presented to me, and it was like, oh yeah, you should definitely pursue this. Yeah. So I think anyone who's, and even if you are in a lot of pain, to Alex's point, do your diligence before you jump on board. Also, be careful. Make sure if you're going to do it, find a group that you really trust, and that'll take care of you, because it is becoming so trendy. I feel like there are groups out there that aren't the most sort of diligent about taking care of the people who do the retreats.
Yeah, and on that pain point, like I know a lot of people kind of lose their footing and seek like parties and use it as this form of escapism without really like, there's a lot you can learn about yourself at a party, but you also need to have like kind of like the right mindset and not go just only to forget about your problems. You kind of like have to work on also finding yourself and solve your problems. And I guess on that note, speaking of parties, like, are there any lately that you've been to?
Yeah, let's do the pivot. Let's do a pivot. Okay. Nice segue. I feel like I was actually like on my phone, like listing out everything that I've been to since the year started, to try to talk about it. So I'll just go in reverse order, and I won't hit everything up. But most recently, actually went to just go see Bonobo, Jack Green, and totally enormous extinct dinosaurs at the Shrine this past weekend.
Nice. How was that?
Really, really good show. Definitely kind of like my demographic kind of early millennial crowd where it's like, oh shit, like you're starting to get a little old, bro, because like looking around, like, you know,
these are your people.
These are my people. It's not the freshest faces. But it was still like amazing show. And, you know, like I feel like where I'm at in terms of like raving, I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely getting older. Like, yeah, sub 30 BPM, you know, like some light atmospheric beats is like where I want to be right now. But yeah, Bonobo played a phenomenal set. I was also really, really blown away by Jacques Green. You know, he's bringing kind of a very like breaks infused kind of atmospheric sound, which for me like really hits, especially kind of in that like sub 130 BPM.
Yeah, range. We don't get enough breaks around here.
Yeah, which I feel like they like in terms of like shit that I hear on Beatport and also live sets that I'll listen to, I'm hearing a lot more breaks out there than I used to. So it does feel like they're having kind of a renaissance. But yeah, certainly I feel like LA doesn't bring a lot of it. But that was a great show. I appreciate, especially, you know, kind of being an early millennial, I feel like I definitely appreciate a party where I don't have to use a porta potty.
Okay.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like the other week I was at more of a kind of traditional warehouse party in there, and I was like, fuck, I wonder how much time in aggregate I have spent inside a porta potty.
That's a good question.
Right? Like as a result of partying, like how many hours have all of us spent?
Right. Yeah.
Right, between like all the festivals and warehouses.
Well, as staff. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, you get the fancy shit. You get the fancy shit. But what else have I seen? So I went to party Melt Collective. They're like a burner crew that throws kind of like an acid house event or party. They're doing really cool shit. They do these sunset sessions that are like like in, I think, kind of Elysian Park area, like outdoors, with a view of the 110, which is fucking phenomenal. What else have I done recently? So have you guys heard of Future Factory?
I've heard of it.
So I think Observe did a party there. That was where they did their like 360 kind of visuals.
That's a compound, right? Like there's multiple.
It's a compound, yeah.
Multiple rooms.
For folks who haven't been, it's pretty phenomenal. I think what they did was they just bought up several of the warehouses in one area and just linked them together into one venue. So you have the one room with kind of like the 360 screens, then they have the outdoor area. I think there's at least 2 more stages beyond that. And then on top of that, there's like an art gallery space that partners up with Miras Gallery, which is, I think, based out of San Francisco and Denver. And they specialize only in kind of like psychedelic visionary art. So you go to a party there and it's sort of just kind of like this insane like wonderland of rave. And what I really appreciate is when it first came to the scene, they had this kind of interesting, although like probably not successful model where it was like, oh, it's a membership only place. And, you know, the only way you can come to the events is if you buy their NFT.
Oh, okay.
And I'm a big crypto guy, but I was like, I don't know that that's gonna like fly, especially because like the NFTs were like 12 to like 1,400. And it's like, okay, for that space, maybe that's worth it if I have assurance that this venue is going to be around in 2 years. But you know, things come and go in the scene, as you know, right? So I think maybe that didn't work, and now they're starting to open up the venue for just other parties.
I was about to say I went to an event there, but it was
you did? Okay.
Definitely not electronic music related.
Interesting.
It was hip hop, I would say. So I have a few friends in like the hip hop scene.
Do you have a podcast for that as well?
No.
Okay.
Actually, I worked on a podcast that like dipped its toes in there.
Okay,
So that's cool. So yeah, we had that big room with like just 90s music, the middle section with like live art and food vendors and stuff. And then the indoors was like all just art vendors, clothing vendors, like all that. It was
It's
cool.
a really cool space. So I feel like as far as, you know, like, because rarely do we get just cool new venues in LA, right? Like, okay, there's a ton of warehouses that people have gone to, but even amongst the warehouses, there's a lot of like go-tos, right? Gladys, or you know, the one on Anderson that now faces the new one that faces the 6th Street Bridge, right? So there's a lot of kind of the same warehouses in the mix. And then in terms of real venues, okay, there's Sound, there's Avalon, like where else? The Lasco, like the Mayan. But yeah, you don't see a lot. Like they don't really do as many raves at a lot of these venues anymore. You know, maybe Avalon does, but and then so now, like for the first time, I feel like in many years, there's actually like it's almost like a club. You know, it's kind of like we have a new club in the arts district that's hosting undergrounds, right? Like everything from Observe to
Trauma Fest.
Yeah. Trauma Fest was there. Yeah. That's right. Hip Hop Festival. I saw Ryex play there, like Burner Vibe. So it's definitely kind of the full gamut, which is super cool.
Yeah. If we could backtrack even a little more, because I haven't really talked to you since then. How was Amsterdam Dance Event?
Oh shit. ADE.
Because I'm thinking of going this year. So just to, you know,
it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. So it's kind of like a Miami Music Week vibe where it's not one festival, right? It's like a combination of multiple festivals going on at once, which is amazing. But so you can either buy the ADE pass and just have all access to everything.
Yeah.
But, you know, the crew and I were like, we don't know if that's kind of, you know, is worth it. Like how many parties can you possibly kind of go to over a 5-day period, right? So maybe. So the way we did it was we just bought tickets for 2 events each night.
Okay.
So everything ranging from, so that was in October. Let me see if I can remember like the itinerary. And by the way, Amsterdam is also just a phenomenal city. It was my first time going and just kind of seeing.
I'm sure.
I thought you were saying, Amsterdam. Phenomenal city. Just everything works. It's kind of like the European Singapore or something. And, you know, I guess just broadly in terms of the party, I think what struck me most, besides the fact that everything's fucking awesome, was how sustainability is front and center of their entire rave scene. So any venue you go to, they give you a little token and they're like, this token gets you a cup, and that cup, that's your cup for the whole night, bro. So if you lose it, you're gonna have to buy another cup, right? Or if you're tired of carrying that cup around, you can exchange it back for a token and keep the token in your pocket and just exchange it back. So I was like, okay, I really appreciate that, you know, because here we treat cups like they're just an infinite resource. Who gives a shit, right? And so I thought that was really cool. The other thing I thought was really cool was, and I get it, sometimes when you're at a festival or something, you just want a burger, but I liked that most of the events were only serving like vegan, vegetarian food.
That's what I noticed when I went to Decmental.
So it's like the sustainability, like front and center, right? And then, just generally speaking, Amsterdam, beautiful, phenomenal. So I would just go just because it's in Amsterdam. And then you tack on the fact that, you know, you've got this incredible rave event that's deeply embedded in the fabric of the city, right? So from the second you get off on the plane and you're like checking in at customs, this would never happen here for like EDC or something, right? The customs person is like, what are you here for? I'm like, ADE. And they're like, yeah, are you excited?
Amazing.
I was like, yes, I am excited.
I have a tragic story. I was in Amsterdam last year. During ADE, but I had no idea that
Wait, so you were in Amsterdam while I was in Amsterdam, and you didn't do it.
We didn't know each other, and also I didn't know about ADE, and that's tragic because I'm a newbie and I'm learning.
Okay.
But I was a DJ back then.
Okay.
So I
You had
got
already
to
learned to
perform.
DJ.
Yeah, exactly. I got to perform at a club.
Okay. So
Nice.
Shout out to
technically,
Jungle. Yeah.
technically, you DJ'd at ADE.
Yeah, sure.
Dude.
I did.
Artistic license.
You weren't a raver, but you DJ'd at ADE. We're gonna just go ahead and say it. You know,
Yeah.
like, and now, like, next time, you know, like, you're promoting yourself, you
Yeah.
can say like, Anna has DJ'd at ADE.
No, I have. I'm claiming it now.
Claim it, 100% claim it. But okay, so walking through on the itinerary, it was pretty broad ranging because I feel like I went with my brothers and sister-in-laws, and pretty like wide ranging tastes amongst the crew.
Okay.
So night one, we did Eric Pridz's Hollow show at a venue there called the Ziggo Dome, which is I think it's like a 17,000 deep venue.
Okay.
So big,
Yeah.
like kind of like Staples Center size, right? Hollow show was cool. Visual was cool. Eric Prydz doesn't really do it for me, but as far as kind of a first party in Amsterdam, and after all the months of planning, it was like, fuck yeah, we did it. Like hugs all around. We did it, guys. Yeah, Eric Prydz, yeah, Hollow. So that was cool. And then, what did we do? Oh, night one was only one party.
Oh, okay.
And then night two, what did we do? We went to go see Closey at like an intimate venue. So there's so many venues in Amsterdam, right? So things just pop around. And then we did Loveland at this amazing warehouse. I think it's called Media Haven or Houthaven, something like that.
Dweeshaven?
What's that?
Dweeshaven?
No, I think it was Houthaven or Media Haven.
Okay.
But from the front, you was like, wait, is this an office building? And then you keep walking, it's this giant warehouse.
Yeah.
It was Loveland's party, which is kind of a big promoter in the Netherlands. And I think we saw like Ame, Jennifer Cardini, amongst others, like a pretty stacked lineup.
Yeah.
So what's crazy, like every night, and there's multiple parties to choose from. You have to you kind of have to pick strategically.
You think you have conflicts when you go to one party. If you're in Amsterdam, it's like
you
can't even pick the party to go to. Yeah.
And then the other thing was sometimes we would find a party that we wanted to go to, like off the AD website when we were buying tickets beforehand. It was like sold out. So there's a lot of parties that you just can't even get into, and stuff that I didn't even know about that I found out about later. Like, what's the big techno one that? Like Speedy J, I think it's called Store.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that till afterward.
Oh, okay.
But that happened, and apparently it was phenomenal.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, I think it's sold out the last 2 years. I don't know if they've only been doing it for 2 years, but it's probably one of those that sells out once they announce it.
And I remember some local guys were telling me about like Store, you should go to Store. I was like, I had no idea.
No idea.
But
another tragic moment.
In retrospect, I would have.
Yeah.
What else did I do? I went to go see. I think it was Houghton, Sama Abdulati, and like a few others at the Gashouder, which is like that famous kind of dome that you see a lot of video of, which was pretty cool. So I won't go through the whole gamut, but the ones that really stuck out to me were Into the Woods Festival. Phenomenal. So it's a local promoter that does a festival literally in the woods, I think earlier in the year. And then as part of ADE, they do kind of a smaller festival by the waterfront. And like, I didn't know anyone on the lineup, like very few, very much kind of a locals only, like European lineup. Like a few here and there. I think D-Dan I saw play.
Nice.
I think maybe Avalon Emerson. So, I mean, there's a few kind of like known names in techno, but for the most part, just like unknowns. There had to have been like 6 stages or something. And like, I liked the vibe because it felt like you were at a county fair more than a festival. But it was still a festival. So if there is one event that I would, at least as far as the ones that I went to, that I would recommend for folks who are going for ADE, 100% do Into the Woods Festival. I think it's 2 days. The other one that was fun to do, but don't know that I would go back again is Insomniac.
Okay.
They had they do Secret Project out there, and the lineup was fucking good. So it's like, okay, we'll go. And actually, the rest of the crew are like EDC fans, so they were like, oh yeah, Insomniac, let's do it. Like I was less sold. I do kind of feel like they played up the Americanness.
Oh, okay.
Right, for the European crowd, to where like it was even more over the top than I feel like EDC is. It was like, oh yeah, we're bringing it for the Europeans. So even though it was like or here's what I would say, even though it was an underground lineup, because it's like Insomniac, they brought a lot of the EDC flair. I think for kind of like the European crowd.
For sure.
Yeah, it's probably. I guess it is interesting to observe like what kind of effect it would have if you're a big organizer, but you're doing it not on home turf. Because I'm sure Dutch people are better at throwing parties in Amsterdam than like an outsider.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think for what it was, like they did a really good job at like, this is how the USA likes to party.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Because it was very like it was impressive, but almost to the point of like too much. It's like it almost feels like McDonald's is sponsoring this party.
God.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Non-ADE related, just, to check out in Amsterdam, I recommend Techno Tuesday at Melkweg and Pact if you go to Rotterdam.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, you went to Rotterdam? I did not do that. How is Rotterdam?
It's cool. Yeah. It's a vibe.
I mean, the Netherlands is a vibe.
The whole thing.
The whole thing. I could definitely like, if I had to live somewhere else, I feel like that would probably be high on my list.
Definitely.
Are you planning on attending Burning Man this year?
So I have a ticket.
Okay.
I don't know what my accommodation sitch is going to be. If this episode comes out like before Burning Man, DM your boy. I don't know what the accommodation sitch is going to be. I think worst comes to worst, I have a homie who he just drops in with his lady. They just drive in and just survive on their own, which I have done. So worst comes to worst, that's what I'll do. Yeah. But it's very, very difficult. So we'll see.
Okay. Yeah. Understandably so.
Okay. I see Anna pulling out the Oracle cards.
Yes. I want us to pull out a card and we can conclude this session with an affirmation for us.
Dude, you're my spirit fam. Okay.
Whichever calls to you.
Can I do it? Can I do the other way?
Yeah.
Oh, there's stuff on both sides.
There's stuff on both sides, yep.
All right.
Whatever.
Just gonna see what the universe delivers here.
There we go.
Oh shit, that's a very important message.
What's it say?
I only seek validation from the divine.
Ooh, what does the back say?
Let's see. I pause and reflect when I find myself seeking external validation. Instead, I observe and notice where that desire is coming from. The only validation I need is the divine guiding me to what is aligned for me. That's crazy because I was just reading some shit literally yesterday, kind of similar message. So
this is why I like it. Alex, are you interested?
Yeah, I'll do it. All right. Let's see. I open myself to the holy medicine of this season of my life. I remind myself that I'm part of nature. There are seasons of joy and seasons of grief. There are seasons of clarity and seasons of confusion. I embrace it all. I am in the perfect season of my life right here, right now.
Amen.
Okay.
You are. Congrats.
Do you pick one too, or?
I will.
Okay. So I'll hold if you want to pick.
Sure.
All right. Let me fan these out for you.
This one calls out to me. I allow the veils to fall off my eyes. Divine, help me to see what I need to see to grow. Okay. I am ready to transform. There is a hidden wisdom that can only be accessed by seeing through spiritual sight. I ask to see with the eyes of the eagle to witness the next stage of my growth.
Fuck yeah.
I am always ready to transform. Always.
Amazing. Thank you so much for bringing these add a definite flair.
And thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Oh yeah, we're winding down. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I mean, I could stay for another few hours.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. This was such a pleasure. And again, congrats on the pod, congrats on the multiple pods, and congrats on the burgeoning musical career. It's really fucking dope and, you know, very well deserved.
Thank you. Yeah, no, thanks for being on. And hopefully we run into you at a party or festival or whatever it may be.
Maybe in Amsterdam.
Maybe in Amsterdam.
I'll book my flight.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right.